whom shall I fear? Though the arrows may fly by night and by day, I will not be afraid.
Are you ready for a great adventure?
I will not be
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the GEB America podcast. I'm your host, Dave Groves. We are so glad to have you with us today. And today we have a special opportunity for you to hear about the forthcoming animated movie, David, which will come out December 19th in theaters. And Phil Cunningham, the director, joins us all the way from South Africa. How are you, sir?
The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the speakers and not necessarily those of GEB America, Oral Roberts University, or their employees. This program is not intended to offer investment, financial, medical, legal, or any other advice. Viewers should consult a subject matter professional regarding any such matters.
So good, and thank you for having me on your show. It's an absolute privilege to be with you.
Well, we are the ones that are privileged. Thank you so much. And so right off the bat, they call this a hook in the industry. What is this animated movie, David, about, and why should families take their entire family, kids and all, to see it this holiday season?
That's a fantastic question. And just to say, the vision for this film, one of the reasons you should go, the vision started 30 years ago. So there's a lot of passion, a lot of energy that's gone into this film. And I'll just quickly say it's from when David's a young shepherd boy through to where he becomes king of Judah. That's the period of his life it carries. Why you should go watch it. It's full of adventure, full of action, full of music, full of heart. I think you'll find it so fun and inspiring, and we'll get to the heart of it and why we made this movie and why it took 30 years. But just to answer your question, David, I think it's just great entertainment, great fun, great music. And in there, though, is something I think really beautiful for you to take away. Yeah.
Well, and I think that, we've talked a lot on the podcast over the years with different directors and producers about how important it is for families to go and see movies that are inspiring, have a great message, have a message of hope, and of course the telling of David and his story is just so many. There's so many layers to him from boyhood to being a king, and so I'm looking forward to taking all of ours kids and seeing it as well. Do you have any interesting thoughts or takes on how you approached the story or how you wanted to tell it? Because it's been told for millennia.
Yeah. So a few things on that note, and why I'll go back to why I started 30 years ago, because that will answer your question. I was canoeing. I grew up in Africa. I was canoeing down a beautiful river called the Zambezi River. You could canoe for 4 days, 5 nights, won't see a human being. And as I watched the thunderstorms and elephants and buffalo, and that's where I grew up, I just fell in love with God. I was like, wow, he's so expansive, so adventurous, so fun, so much joy. And I was like, I just fell in love with God. And then I was reading David's story, and I was reading in Acts that said, I found in David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. So I was like, wow, because David's story is exciting, and it's full of flaws and humanness, but it's very exciting, very adventurous. I was like, this story could give us a glimpse of God's heart. And so I wasn't yet in the movie industry at that stage, but that's where it was birthing me. I want to get into the movie industry. As a boy, I always grew up drawing cartoons. And I was like, if I could tell the story of David, and that's what motivated me to jump into the movie industry. And from there we started. We actually have been 10 years making the film. I'll say one other thing that I hope stands out, David, about this David movie, hopefully compared to others. And it's not even to compare, it's just to say what I hope stands out anyway. An example, I was walking with my wife through Paris recently, looked up at the Arc de Triomphe, and if you look at the scale of it, the attention to detail, And all around Paris, you've got factories and office blocks. And as filmmakers and creators, we could just churn money and make movies. But my passion with David was to make an Arc de Triomphe, like get the scale right, pay attention to detail. And like Walt Disney said, people won't always see the detail, but they'll feel the detail. So I can unpack that a bit more for you, but just quickly to say, I hope that as people watch this movie, it's an Arc de Triomphe, that they're like, wow, we can feel the scale, the love, and the attention to detail in this movie. Yeah.
Well, I think just in watching the trailer, which those of you that are watching on YouTube, you would have seen the trailer here, and I can see the detail for sure. I mean, it's one of those stories where you're like, well, I know the story, but your detail that you get to throughout it is very evident. And I think that for me, especially in the world we live in, with attention being really the as a friend of mine says, it's the new currency, getting people's attention. It does keep your attention. It kept my attention, and I think it'll keep kids' attention very well, for sure. As you guys have been working on, the finalization of it, kind of the promotion, what are the things that you're hearing from people that have been able to, see the screenings, or they've been able to, watch or learn more about it? What has been the response?
So I think what's been really exciting about the response is that as a story, the response we're getting so far, so it's just amazing in terms of the story delivers, it lands, it ends well, it connects. The other thing I think which is so exciting, and I'll speak to that for a second because my passion is story, is that it's from the music point of view, I think it really lands for people, the feedback we're getting. And that makes me so excited because we know that David wrote half the Psalms. He was the most amazing songwriter, most amazing musician, which was awesome because it meant authentically you could bring music into the movie. And I'm not a fan of just shoving music into a movie for the sake of it, but with David, you could authentically just bring those songs and that music. And the cool thing about that, David, I think is when music is authentic, you can feel the spirit and the soul of someone. And David, what I love about him, when he was happy, he expressed his joy. When he was fearful, he said, "Why, God?" When he was in doubt, he expressed his doubts, and the music just really brings that out in such a beautiful way. It makes it, oh, wow, David could speak to God like that. He could really talk about his fears. He could really celebrate his joy, And so I think some of the feedback we're getting is connected to the music, which I'm very excited about that. And then the other thing is, I think the attention to detail that we talked about, one of my huge passions is quality. And I was reading Michael Dell's biography where he says, always try and work with people or employ people smarter than yourself. People who've worked on this project, there's so many examples, David, but our head of story was 20 years at Pixar. Our director of photography was 20 years at DreamWorks. Some of the animators came from the big studios, and then we mixed that with youthful talent. But I think when people are watching the movie, they're feeling that level of quality and excellence, which, really I can't take credit for. It was just an incredible gravitational pull that started to pull people into this project. And that's what excites me about it. I just didn't want to be another movie. I wanted it to be, you could feel the excellence in it and the energy in it and the passion in it. Yeah.
So let's talk about some of those people that have been a part of this. So you've got some really amazing people in the Christian worship world. We're all going to recognize who David is, for sure. So talk about the stars of this: Brandon Engman, Phil Wickham, who I'm talking about, and Katie Bernstein.
Yeah, so definitely I'll chat about that. So quickly to talk about Brandon, young David, Phil, adult David, both incredible. I'll start with Phil and I'll go to Brandon. Amazing. So with Phil, what we discovered on this journey, David, we were trying to cast somebody who could sing because obviously music is in there. What we discovered is a lot of great singers can't act. So Phil was a rare combination because we could hear immediately he's got it. He can act. Mm-hmm. But most importantly for me with Phil and with Brandon was there's a verse that says, "Not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord." And I feel like Phil just bought, and Brandon as well, just bought that spirit, that adventure, that energy of David. And I was like, and the other director with me, his name's Brent Doors. We were both like, these are our guys to bring David to life. And so I think with both of them, they just brought that beautiful spirit into the movie. And their work ethic. I mean, Phil's work ethic and Brandon's work ethic is amazing. They show up, they go again and again and again until they get it just right. So there's no accident that their performance is so good, and they were just so great to work with. Yeah, so that was incredible, and the whole voice cast was just amazing. And never mind the talent of the people working on animation and lighting and photography. But yeah,
For
you were
sure.
asking about the voice talent, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, you have a few others that are in that cast that people are going to recognize. Lauren Daigle.
She is an amazing human being. And I was telling a story recently. She told me that I think it was Disney World or Disneyland. You had to go along and see it's like a dummy thing. Can you be a good voice actor? And she went just to try out, and they told her, no, you won't make it as a voice actor. She was like, right, I'm going to show you I can be a voice actor.
Yeah.
So she really went and worked at it. And like Phil, she is so humble, so fun. She's a really fun person. And just working with her was amazing. I just wish there was actually a bigger role for her, because the role she played, she just nailed. And she brought so much joy, so much fun. And I like the fact that somebody said, you won't make it as a voice actor. And she went out and I'll show you, I've got to be a good voice actor. And she's an awesome voice
Never let the detractors, right, tell you what you can't do if God's behind it. Talk a little bit about, I thought this was an interesting thing, is talk a little bit about your co-director, Brent, and how that worked, because I know he was one of the co-writers, I believe.
Yeah, in fact, he was the writer. There was a story team, but he actually was the writer. So the vision started with me 30 years ago, and I had the story in my mind. Brent and I have worked together for over 25 years. And you know that story where it says when David went to fight Goliath, he said, I've taken out lions and I've taken out bears. God will help me with this giant. So I think the beautiful thing for Brent and I, we've fought lions together, we've fought bears together, we've done so many other projects, and we've always had David in our mind. And he is the most incredibly talented and humble individual. So we've just got this most amazing shorthand. And as we journey together, we built the shorthand. And then so the story was in my mind. He was the actual writer. He did most of the work. So no, he's an incredible director. And we just worked together as we went through, bringing different things, but yeah, his understanding of drama and animation performance and music, he's incredible. Yeah.
That's so good. For our audience that maybe is a little less familiar in certainly the entire story of David, or understanding all the little layers as I mentioned earlier, tell us something that you really like that is a particular part of the movie, or something you think people were really, really delighted by or will really stand out to them.
So I'd say that's a great question. I'd say quickly to the audience that the main kind of movies you get is it's got what you call a positive change arc, where your hero starts off here and he changes for the positive. David's story is a bit more like Hacksaw Ridge, what you'd call a testing arc. So your main character starts out like raw gold, he goes through the fire, and he becomes more pure gold himself. But the big thing that changes is the world around him. So like in Hacksaw Ridge, our main character changes the world around him. And with David, it's legitimately hundreds of years, no mighty men. Suddenly David comes along, he inspires this generation. You get this long list of mighty men. So we know he changed the world around him, continues to actually. So what I love about his story is he comes in, he goes through the fire, and then he changes the world around him and he points people towards God. I think that's the big thing about the story. As they watch the movie, when he takes out Goliath, he's like, surely now you can see God is amazing. And they're like, no, David, you're amazing. And he's like, no, God's amazing. And by the end of the story, he's trying to shift people. And that's the change that happens. But the other thing I'd say, David, is what I love about David is just how accessible he is. Like I was saying earlier, he's so human. He's not a superhero. His fact was that he had faith in God and God's love for him. And he could cry, he could shout, he could complain, he could celebrate, but he had such faith in God's love for him. And I think that's the big takeaway. I can relate to him. We all flawed. We all make mistakes, but his life just shows us it's not about being perfect, but it's about relating to God and trusting God's friendship for us, So that's what I love about his story. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think too that, David is definitely he's a man of different, levels.
Yes.
He was expressive. One would say that if he were alive today, he probably would be in the movies or in theater.
Yeah.
Because he expressed his feelings. He was a songwriter. He was very, dramatic, and the things he expressed to God and to his men, how he met and dealt with King Saul and all that whole thing as he grew in the king's court. So it's definitely a wonderful and multi-dimensional character for a filmmaker like yourself.
Yeah, and so fun to tell his story. And one of the quick element that I love, like we know when Jesus talks, he says, love your enemies, be kind to those who mistreat you. And I love David's grace for Saul. You mentioned Saul. But when Saul's trying to kill him and he's justified, he doesn't take revenge into his own hands. He graces Saul. And I just love that. It's such a lesson for us to learn in the life. It's not about an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. David showed us, his story shows us you can grace somebody even if they're attacking you. And I love that part of his character as well. It's like how graceful he was to Saul, and how kind he was.
Let me ask you this, one of my last questions, because I always like to think of it from perspective of a parent. What, as a parent taking their kids to this, small kids and elementary and whatnot, what is something that you want them to watch for that might be an opportunity for them to maybe create a really good family, teachable moment, something that you really want them to, maybe as they leave the theater, and I do this, when you leave church, you'll say, well, what did you learn? And we'll talk about the story or the lesson. And as a parent, you try to help maybe create a little bit more of a launch pad, for them from that story. What is something within the movie you think that parents can look for to be able to do that?
I think there's two things I'd love if these conversations start after the movie. One is wow, I never knew God was so exciting and so adventurous and so much joy and so much life. So often he gets portrayed as austere and angry and boring. And I'm I hope as people come out of the movie, it's wow, do you see God as, if you live your life with God, it's exciting and it's energetic and it's got full of color. And then I think the other thing is something we were just talking about, which is you can approach, Jesus said, unless you come to me like little children, you'll not inherit the kingdom. David was so childlike, like I was saying. He just spoke out his fear, his joy. And I'm hoping that as kids walk out, they're because there's a beautiful song in there where he sings, "Why God?" And we know Jesus repeats that exact psalm on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me?" I think as parents walk out, it's wow, can we connect with God like that? Can we be that honest with God? And I'm hoping that parents can say, yes, you can trust him. You can share your fears, your hopes, your joys with him. He's your best friend. And so, I'm hoping that's the conversation. It's wow, God is my best friend on this life, this journey of life, this adventure of life. If that's the conversation, then I'll be delighted. Yeah, that comes out.
The whole idea that we come to Jesus as little children, right?
Yeah.
The faith of a child.
Exactly.
And how they have no preconceived notions. They haven't lived a life of dealing with everything that we go through.
Yeah.
Oh, that is amazing. So one more question for you, but first I just want to remind everybody that if you are, if you're watching or listening, please share and and hit that bell on YouTube so that you can be updated. And we really hope that you'll share out this content of the podcast episode today to your friends. The movie is David. It's the animated release from Angel Studios, comes out December 19th. And we have been so excited to have Phil Cunningham here with us all the way from South Africa, telling us all about this exciting new movie. So here's a question for you, and maybe there's an answer, or maybe you got something cooking and you don't want to talk about it. What's next? What is some, you talked about this was a 30-year dream. Now that you've got this, you've reached the finish line, kind of. What else are you really hoping to do, or is there a project?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's two projects in our mind right now. One is another biblical story and another one's an allegorical. The allegorical one will have very much an African base and African feel. So the original fairy tales were riffed off medieval Europe. So knights and castles and dragons. And we want to riff off an allegorical story, but riff off Africa, which I won't get into what that story is, but that's the kind of movie we want to make. And then the other one, we really want to make a story on Esther, because I just think her story is incredible. It's super inspiring. So we're moving down that track quickly, and that would be our next biblical story, which I think, I know David is for boys and girls and everyone, and Esther as well will be for boys and girls, but perhaps we'll land more for girls, So I think we'd love to drive our next biblical movie towards Esther. Yeah, to answer your question. Yeah.
That's so awesome. Well, we're excited. And for those of you that if you go to the Angel Studios website, if you go to angel.com, you can find out showtimes in your area. You can become a part of the guild, all of that. And you can, of course, see the trailer on our YouTube page for GEB America. And also on our, we have some information there on our pray.com/GEB America page as well. Phil, I really am so glad that you joined us. Interesting thing, you grew up, you talk about the Zambezi River. I had the privilege of, it's been a few years ago, to see Victoria Falls in flood stage. Yeah, it was amazing. And a friend of ours base jumped off the bridge, bungee jumped. I say base jumped. He bungee jumped, and we were all like, "Man, if that thing snaps, you just got some, you got some alligators waiting on you at the bottom." So I got to ask you, you canoed it? Isn't that what you said, or kayaked it?
Yeah. So
what was that like? Because in Africa, I mean, there's wildlife. I mean, I saw hippos. I saw elephants along the river. And of course, you know, we saw at night, you would see 10,000 eyes looking back at you if you shined a light out on the river. So what was that like?
I mean, I grew up in it, so I loved it and it felt natural. But where I was canoeing was below the Zambezi, below the falls. It's called the Lower Zambezi. That's the floodplains. And as I was saying, you could go for 4 days, 5 nights. You won't see a human being. Just floodplains of elephant, buffalo. There's no campsites. You just stop on the bank. There's no toilets or campsites or anything. You just stop on the bank, make camp, and then you canoe the next day. And the stars are above you. It's just the most amazing experience in the world. I call it, for me, I call it God's headquarters. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we know that Africa, you know, we know the Fertile Crescent, we know creation, you know, we know how everything started right up there, you know, in that corner of the continent. So it is an amazing place. And I was blown away by it. So that's pretty wild that you got to grow up in that environment.
Yeah. And that's where David was birthed, was right there, just below the Victoria Falls. Yeah.
So very cool. That's so cool that God gave it to you. Well, I'm going to see the movie in its entirety only because it has a great title. You know, so you know, I try to see the movies that have my name in it in some regard. And honestly, he's always been my favorite character from the Bible, and not because of the name, but more about feeling like the things that he has walked through. I feel like I get it. You know, maybe I've never been chased by a king, and you know, anybody tried to track me down, or I've never led an army. But it's pretty amazing story nonetheless. So we want to invite everybody to make sure you share and like. And tell people about the podcast episode, and then be sure to go see the movie coming up in just a few weeks when this podcast drops. December 19th is when it releases in theaters, and it's a perfect opportunity. And everybody loves to go to movies at the holidays, so what a great opportunity. Phil, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to talk to you again in the future, maybe with that Esther project.
Thank you so much. Thanks, David. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time for another episode of the GEB America podcast. Until then, I'm Dave Grove saying goodbye for now.